What is going on, guys? Today we're going to bring you a special video. It's been requested quite a bit. We're going to be talking about decoys, and we have a lot of different decoys. This is my roommate Justin. I don't think he's been in any videos other than the hunting videos, so say hi, Justin.
Hello, folks.
And today we've got a lot of stuff to cover, so stay tuned. This is going to be a lot of really good information for you guys who are wanting to know about decoys, the decoys that we use, decoy spreads, and the decoy spreads that we use, and just some little tips and tricks that we found along the way. So let's get started. We're going to talk about the types of decoys that we have here first off. And we've got a lot of different types. And so first of all, we've got just some generic mallards. I've got them on my Rig'em Wrights over here. So I've actually got... they're all clipped together. If you guys don't have Rig'em Wrights, invest in them. They are definitely a game changer when it comes to decoys. So I've got a dozen mallards here on this Rig'em Wrights. I've got 3 different brands of decoys. I've got Game Winners, which are from Academy. I've got some Tangle Frees, and I've got some Flambeaus that I got on sale at Walmart one time. And so I'm gonna set these down. You guys get the gist.
I mean, they're just mallards.
They're mallards. Everybody knows what they look like. You know, about 35 bucks for a box of them. Like I said, I've got 3 different types of mallard decoys, and that's because I honestly don't feel like the brand matters or what they really look like. They don't all have to be uniform, because there's gonna be genetic diversity in all the ducks anyways. So I bought some Tangle Frees, and I really do like them. My Game Winners have lasted me for 3 years now, and they've held up pretty good. I've lost a couple here and there just from abuse and use. So those are my decoys. I also have a couple of these little teals. We'll talk about those later. And I've also got a dozen of these big feet. Justin, what do you have that we use?
Well, I mean, I've got 2 different types of herder decoys. I got some in a big package. They came with 2 dozen, I believe, or no, it was a dozen. And then they're a lot smaller of a mallard. And then I also have another set of herders that are a lot bigger. Like, it's night and day difference looking at them. I also have some Game Winner teal, as you can see right here. I've got some Game Winner widgeons. I also have some mallards feeders. I also have some redhead feeders, as well as these Game Winner sleepers. And for me, that's all I've got. I mean, you tend to invest in a lot of decoys, but a good variety is definitely a big deal in my opinion as to what you choose for your decoys.
So I also want to touch on this. You've got this one rigged up with a strap weight and a string. That's another option that you guys can do with your decoys. It's worked for plenty of years, and I don't think it'll ever go out of date, but it is definitely a lot easier to use the Rig'em Wrights. I do use these strap weights with some of my decoys because Rig'em Wrights are kind of a little bit expensive, and I don't know. I only feel like I only need a dozen mallards most of the time. Total, we counted yesterday. How many decoys do we have?
I don't remember, honestly, a lot.
We have 42 decoys on Rig'em Wrights plus whatever we've got on the strings.
That's just what we got.
That's just what we have. Plus, Lane has decoys. Shane has decoys. I don't think Luke has decoys.
No.
But so Mallywhacker Outfitters over here, we got a lot of decoys that we use, and we do them a lot of different ways. Justin, you wanted to talk about some of these teal, right?
Yeah, I mean, the teal, the stuff that we've got here, as you can tell, there's different kinds of teal. There's definitely a different size, you know, with them, as well as quality. My opinion as to these teal is mine tend to be more detailed, so that's something that you're going to want closer in on your spread. And for these ones right here, you typically want to use those to fill in gaps, just to kind of add for bodies. And you can use that with your mallards too. I know with your flambeau mallards, we used one like that as well. But just something that I've experienced and I've learned is that you're going to have different kinds of quality of a decoy, and you typically want your better looking decoys to be at that finishing point where a duck's going to be, because whenever they're up in the sky, they're typically going to see a number of bodies, not actually the detail of it.
Yeah, so you're saying like where they come in and finish with their feet down and they're cupped, you want them looking at some of the better looking decoys as opposed to some of the more beat up and older decoys. Yeah. That's a good point. So with decoy spreads, what we like to do is either pods or a horseshoe or a J. Those all we circle through those depending on the wind situation. So most of the time, actually like 95%, like in a perfect world, you would have the wind at your back every single time you hunt, but that doesn't always happen. So you have to kind of adjust. So if the wind is at your back, you're going to set up with a just generic horseshoe, a U, or kind of any variation where you're going to be cupping, you're funneling them down in towards your blind. And so that's on a perfect day with the wind at your back, and you're golden with that one. But then there's other days where you're going to be hunting a crosswind, or maybe a wind that's coming towards you, which is a little bit more difficult. And so what we've done in the past is with a crosswind, we kind of run a J, or we have the longer side out farther and it scoops in towards us, or we run a couple of pods, pod here, pod there. So then they're just kind of coming wherever. And then with the wind at your, like coming towards you, there's really not a lot of things you can do to really entice the ducks to finish towards your blind. They're going to finish how they want. So just set up the decoys to where they're going to be finishing away from you. That's what I've done, and it seems to work out okay. Not the best shooting in the world, but still gets you to finish birds.
Yeah.
Like you said, with the crappier, not as good looking decoys, we use those to just fill in spaces and to kind of give us a more beefy spread. Just having a dozen. I've got a dozen of these little teal decoys. I got them at Walmart after the season was over a couple of years ago. Freshman year. It's our junior year now, and so
we're old.
We basically just use these things to fill in holes and make the spread just look a little bit bigger. We don't put them where they finish, but we put them on the outside to just kind of grab more attention. And that's the same thing here with this goose. Old gooser right here. We have a dozen of these full body geese, and
some floaters too.
I've got 3 floaters and 2 dozen shells. And when things ice over and you're hunting just a little hole in the ice, geese help when you put them on the outside of the ice, because the geese will just kind of sit on the edge of the ice there and melt through and make the hole a little bigger. So I like to put the geese out there, just kind of make it look a little bit more realistic for the situation, and it gives you a better spread because it catches more attention because of the size and mass of your spread. Now, there's going to be times where you only want a smaller spread, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for a smaller spread for me, like certain ways that I have them lined up, I always make sure to take mallards, or depending as to where you're going. It depends as to which ones you take. So typically I always take my mallards with me whenever I go onto a hunt, and reason why I have these hooked up like this and I put them in a bag is because, I mean, they're not so convenient, but whenever I do need them, it's easy to get to. With the ones with the Texas rigs, I can just grab them and go and don't have to worry about it or anything else. But really what I put all of my decoys that I might exchange, might not take, or anything else, I normally typically put them like that.
If you were going to give advice to anybody out there on what decoys to bring, how many they need, and how to set them up, what would you say?
Well, depends on the time of year as well. Later in the season, you don't want to have a lot of decoys. It kind of scares them off. But kind of in the mid-range is where I would typically take most of my decoys. If you went to a marsh, I would take your mallards, your widgeons, your teal, and I would definitely take your feeders as well. But for like a lake hunt, like we do a lot of, I normally wouldn't want to take those, but I would definitely take my sleepers.
Yeah. So like number wise, I would suggest for anybody out there to have a dozen mallards. That is my go-to when I go out and hunt. If I'm just going out myself or with a buddy, a dozen mallards does just fine. And you set them up just like I said earlier in this video.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've killed plenty of birds over just a dozen, and I've killed plenty of birds over 3 dozen. You know, it all depends on the situation, but most of the time a dozen mallards is going to suit you just fine.
We hunted a while, just me and you, on just a dozen, and we did just right.
Yep.
So, like I said, it just depends. It's the time of year is when you need to focus on how many ducks you take.
Yeah.
So.
And you hear from a lot of people saying, oh, you need these best looking decoys on the market, and oh, these ones are flocked heads and all that. You know, that's all great. I mean, honestly, I'd love to have flocked head decoys and the best ones on the market, but I mean, I'm a junior in college. I don't have that kind of money to spend on things.
True that.
So we just kind of work with what we've got, and we kill plenty of birds with just these plain old decoys, and they do just fine. So, you know, if you want to invest your money in that, you can. I can't promise that it will work any better than these decoys right here on this table. So,
variety does help, though.
Variety and mass and all that. So, you got anything else we can add?
I think we covered most of it.
So, if you guys have any tips for anybody else, feel free to leave it in the comments. They'd love to hear it, and I would too. If you guys have any suggestions for video topics that you want me to do video on, Justin can join me, and we will get to those too. So I hope this helps you guys figure out your decoy spreads and what kind of decoys you want to use, and I hope you guys have a great season, and I will catch you on the next video.